Join Chris and Suzanne Vester today on Faith, Family, Fulfillment as they lead discussions on creating a strong bond and having a loving relationship through Christian values. Guests on the show share insightful stories and ideas to enhance a positive family upbringing and create trust in one another, as well as providing encouraging words of wisdom everyone should hear. And now, here are Chris and Suzanne.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Faith, Family, Fulfillment. I am Chris, your co-host.
And I'm Suzanne.
And as always, we've got a successful couple with us, Ryan and Trish Michler. And to give you a little bit of background, as I said before, it's real easy to find data on one and sometimes not the other. So all the data out there is on Ryan this time. 8 years with the National Guard. In 2015, he started his podcast called Order of Man, which led to the creation of the Iron Council, which is sort of a mastermind of guys who want to develop their connection, contribution, condition, and calibration. And I know that because we actually coach on that using your book in our organization, which I really appreciate. Married 18 years to Trish, and they are parents of 4 children. And I asked Trish, how do I introduce you? She said, wife and mother. So here we are, Trish and Ryan Michler. And before we get started, guys, I'll pray us in and then we'll get started. Lord, thank you for this time together. I just ask for your guidance and leadership and how these questions go and how this conversation goes, because we know that the impact is going to be all for you and that you, as always, get the glory in the story. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So, Ryan, I'm going to go back. When I first sent you the invite, one of the things that sparked that invite is you did a post that was the 10 green flags to look for in a woman. And you actually did a podcast on it, which was amazing. So I kind of want to go into first, before we get on that, let's get your origin story. So let's go back before the 18 years of marriage. How long have you been together? How'd you guys meet? That kind of thing. How'd that work out?
Yeah. So we met, the short version is, I'll give you the medium version. Maybe the first time I ever saw her, she was actually dating one of my friends, and her and a friend of mine were, I think, going on a date, and they stopped by the house before they went. And I was immediately just drawn to her, just how beautiful she was. I didn't know anything else about her. And then I don't think we saw each other for probably a couple of years, maybe not that long, a year or so. And we were both working at the mall together at different stores. And so between breaks and lunches and things like that, we'd flirt with each other and whatnot. And so we ended up starting, dating probably about 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah. About
20 years ago, started dating. And then while we were dating, I had a military mission. I was gone for about 3 months. 3 months or so when I was I was supposed to go to Iraq, and about a week and a half before I left, our command came to us and said, hey, we're not going to Iraq anymore. We're actually going to Fort Lewis in Washington to train ROTC cadets for the summer. So that's what we did. We went up there and trained ROTC cadets. And that was when we were dating, got back. Long story short, again, we got married. And then I was doing a little bit of travel. We had moved to California to open a retail clothing store that I worked at the time. And I think we were married for 6 months-ish. And my National Guard unit was activated again. And I actually ended up going to Iraq that time. So between dating and marriage, for the first 4 years of our relationship, I was gone for almost 2 years of that time. So once we got done with that, we've been together ever since. So that's the shortened version.
Trish, he said you were gone for that much of the dating period. How'd that work out for you? Like, what was that? How was that struggle for you?
It was interesting when we were dating, because I was actually still in high school. And so I was busy. I was doing high school and college, and I was able to wrap that up. And I finished school and went to Virginia on an internship. So I just stayed busy, and we were able to talk pretty often because he had cell phone access. I had it, which seems like so weird, but really cell phones were just kind of coming out during that time.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was nice to be able to stay in touch. And then after we'd been married for 6 months, it was really a shock that he was going to be gone so long, because we had just like you said, we had just moved to California. We were kind of on this great path, and then the rug just got pulled out under our feet. So kind of same thing. I just got really busy with work and volunteering and just kept my head down and kept going while he was doing what he needed to do.
Gotcha. So I started off saying that you had made a post that really stuck out to me. And it was a 10 green flags to look for in a woman. And I want, while you're talking about that, because I'm going to ask you first, I want Trish to be thinking about 10 green flags for men. And if she's ever thought about that. Right. So those 10 green flags, is that something that you developed, like as you look back and you see how your relationship, how strong that relationship is? Obviously you see these traits in Trish, but is it something that you thought about going into the relationship, or is it something that's just developed over time?
I actually don't see him in Trish. I wish she would listen to that podcast and she would and she would learn what I'm looking for. No, it's yeah, look, I'll be really frank with you. I don't remember right offhand what those 10 green flags are. So you might have to remind me on that. Sure. But yeah, I know with 100% certainty that those are the characteristics that I fell in love with Trish, and that she's also developed too over, the last 2 decades of being together. Really, it does seem long when you say it that way. I'll say it this way. I think I lucked out. I didn't know to look for those traits 20 years ago. And I'm glad that I stumbled into that, quite literally stumbled into that.
Right.
And so I think I was very fortunate that way in finding Trish. But I also want to make sure that young men who listen to the podcast, who are trying to find a woman to partner with for the rest of their lives, heed that advice. And it's a little frustrating because a lot of the times what I see online anymore is, the 10 red flags and what things to look out for. And certainly there's things that you should be aware of. But I wanted to paint that in a positive light is, yes, be aware of the red flags that are there and address those things early and often in a relationship. But also try to be moving towards something. And these are qualities that I think are admirable and ideally, not always, but ideally create an incredible life for you and the woman you decide to partner with in life and raise a family together with.
Gotcha. Well, you said I needed to remind you some of those. So maybe one of the best ways we can go through it is just kind of one at a time. We can talk about them, and Trish can give her feedback on that. Good relationship with parents. You said that's definitely one of the 10 green flags. Why do you think that?
Well, I mean, ideally, my goal within our dynamic is to be an intimate, connected husband and wife, and to raise our kids in righteousness. I would want to, the best of my ability, ensure that she knows what that actually looks like and how that manifests itself, and what examples from both her mother can she draw upon, and also what is her father like, and what would she expect me to be like. And again, I stumbled into it. So fortunate. She's got a beautiful mother who obviously loves her family and shows that love in ways that I see in Trish as well. Her dad has always been somebody who, even though he's had to sacrifice a lot, probably even time with the family, is somebody who's always been committed and done what he's needed to do to make sure that he cares for his children, his 5 children. And so she's got a great example of what that looks like. And I'm not saying it can't work without that. It certainly can. But I just think there's a higher likelihood if a woman has, and a man too, has a strong example of what this family dynamic should look like. Now with me, I actually didn't have that as the husband, coming to the relationship. I had a bit of I don't want to say dysfunctional. That's not the right way to say it, but my mother primarily raised me on her own. And so I didn't have that great example of what a powerful, strong family dynamic, a nuclear family, looked like. So I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think a green flag is knowing that she comes from a family that's connected and loves each other and does what they need to do to provide for their family and lead them in righteousness.
Awesome. Trish, anything to add on that? How does that hit you?
No, I mean, I love my family, so it's great to hear his admiration for them. And I was thinking, because yes, I did come from a father and a mother and a connected family, and grandma and grandpa were involved, cousins, aunts and uncles. We have a very big family, very big traditional family. And then to learn that Ryan didn't have that, it was an eye-opening thing for me. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you don't have these like giant Thanksgiving feasts with your family? He's like, no, like we don't really see each other. And so to learn that side of it and to see how he was and like how he's developed from that. And I have so much love and respect for his mom because she fulfilled both the father and the mother role a lot of the time, like he said. And so seeing how his mom put so much love and care and devotion into her kids, even though it must have been super, super hard. And then to see Ryan's love for his mom, like that was always and still is immediate, like when he talks about her. So seeing how strong and close and connected he was with his mom was a huge sell for me.
Cool. Honoring femininity and masculinity. Like I really want to hear about this one because it's like it's a big deal right now, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so strange in just culture and society. I was going to say, I think masculinity gets more villainized and demonized than femininity. I would probably say that's still true, but also I get frustrated. One of the most frustrating things to me, even outside of the scope of work I do, and I guess it's connected, is when I hear people who diminish and demean and dismiss a woman who wants to be a wife and a homemaker and raise her children at home. I mean, you heard it when you asked Trish how she wanted to be introduced. She said wife and mother. And it's so frustrating when I hear in society today, actually, I hear this more from women than men who dismiss that and demean that and think that a woman who wants to spend time with her husband and be in the house and turn it into a loving home and raise her children in righteousness, that somehow that woman is inferior to somebody who would go out into the workforce and act more like a man. Now, look, I'm not going to say that any woman who goes out into the workforce that's the wrong answer either. I'm not saying that at all. I commend, my mom, she worked 2-3 jobs at a time to make sure that the roof was over our head and we had food on the table. But I'm pretty certain that if you were to ask her if she would have found more fulfillment in being home with my sister and myself and being able to raise us and turn that house into the home, she would have jumped at that opportunity. So again, I'm not going to dismiss a woman going out into the workforce, but I do get frustrated when women actually primarily dismiss and mock women who decide to stay at home as if it's somehow inferior. It's not inferior. It's one of the most noble callings I think a woman can step into. And I honor that femininity of nurturing and support and love and all the things that Trish brings into the home that she just wouldn't be able to do if she was out chasing a career somewhere.
Trish.
It just got me thinking, like my role as a woman and a wife and a mother and all the other hats that I wear, I'm able to do those because Ryan fulfills his masculine roles. I'm able to focus on those things because I have the time. I'm not the one that has to provide for our family. I'm not the one that has to protect our family. So that way it leaves the room and the space for me to grow in the other directions. I've always loved that. My number one goal growing up is I wanted to be a wife and mother. There's lots of other things I enjoy doing. There's aspirations I still have, but this is my number one focus. And I love my role. I'm happy to be here. And, I get it. Some women, they do want to work and they want to have a career and they want to have family too. You know what? I think if that works for you, then that's great. That's awesome that you have that choice. For me and my principles and values and goals, this is where I want to be. And I think that's amazing because I can do that because Ryan does his.
Again, it's just frustrating to me. And I got to reiterate, because it is really just a pain point for me, is like, I don't think either of us would dismiss a woman who says, I want to go be a CEO or I want to be an attorney or I want to be a doctor or whatever their ambition is. Like, I don't think either of us, any of us would mock that or undermine or dismiss that. And again, the frustrating part for me is that somebody on that side who wants to do that would undermine and mock, especially somebody who believes in women's empowerment. This is the frustrating thing. Some women believe in this concept of women's empowerment. I get that. I understand that. But what I think they're actually saying is that in order to be empowered, you have to do what I want you to do, which is to go out into the workforce and act like a man. Like, you don't have to be a man to be equal to me. Like, my wife and I, we're not equal, right? Like, I mean, you can look at us, like we're very different. It's pretty clear we're not equal, but that doesn't mean that I'm inferior or superior or vice versa for her. So to me, when I hear women's empowerment, I think that means a woman is empowered to live the life that she wants, not go out into the workforce and act like a man.
Yeah, I hear
it's
you.
not a forced thing.
Right.
I couldn't
Right.
agree with that more. I think the most empowering thing is having choice and having the ability to choose to go in either direction or have a combination of both. That's how much more empowered can you get than having the free choice to do what your heart calls you to do.
That's right.
Right.
You want to do that one? The friends.
Yeah. So the third thing that you had listed, that friends who are good for her, share with us kind of what you mean by that. And then Trish, I would love for you to share kind of what your friendships mean to you.
I'll take the opposite approach. I mean, if your wife or the woman that you're interested in has friends who are not good for her, who are out, doing things that, are not going to serve her, the family dynamic well, it's only a matter of time before she starts acting like those women. So, I mean, and that one to me is pretty clear. A woman that's good for my wife is going to be somebody who has similar goals and desires, friends who edify and uplift her, friends that actually care about her and don't want to just take from the relationship, but want to give back to the relationship. And I'll admit, I used to be the kind of guy who would make Trish feel guilty for wanting to go out and be with friends or spend time with her mom or her sister, or, do the things that were good for her outside of our relationship. I would make her feel guilty for doing that because I wanted her for myself, right? So it was selfish. And I realized that was a problem because she wasn't going out and getting the energy that she needed from outside sources. And it was a real strain, I think, on her emotionally. And now when she says, hey, I want to go spend time with so-and-so, and not that she needs my permission, that's not what I'm saying at all, but we respect each other enough to communicate these things. Like, she's not asking me for permission to go spend time with a friend. She's telling me and then coordinating with me how that's going to work. She's not saying, is this okay? She just spent some time last week in Texas with a very close friend. And I love it. I'm so glad that she's able to go out and spend time with somebody that I like personally too, that I think is a good friend, that somebody that actually cares about her. And then she comes back and she's more energetic and more dynamic and more fulfilled and wholesome. And I've had to let go of the fact that, I can't necessarily as a husband provide all of that. She has to get some of that energy from outside sources. I just want to make sure that they're coming from good places, because if they aren't, and you're considering getting engaged or into a relationship with a woman who has bad friends, like, that's going to spill over into your relationship 100%.
And like how I feel about my friendships are, I don't know if it's like an age thing or a maturity thing, but I don't have time for just kind of like flaky friends. Like, I've got too much to do. I've got more in life I want than to waste my time with people that I probably don't really like to begin with. So if it's not something, if it's like a group hanging out that I'm just kind of like meh about, I probably won't do it. But now you get me in touch with some of my really good friends and I will drop everything for them. If someone's having a crisis, I'm there. If someone needs to talk, I'm there. Someone wants to go to the plant nursery, I'm totally there. And so for me, it's been finding those good, wholesome relationships that Ryan was talking about. And that's where I want to spend my time. These are people I enjoy having conversations with. These are people I can open up to and talk about things maybe I'm struggling with. And I think having that outside friendship outside of the marriage, because obviously I talk to Ryan about things, but there's some conversations that are just easier to have with a girlfriend, And so I think just developing those good friendships and putting more effort into those is worth having. I'd rather have 3 or 4 really great friends that I can depend on and trust than 40 friends that I'm just kind of like meh about.
There's another factor to this, and I'm going to try to tread lightly here, but I think it's important, is that when Trish said that she has friends that are where she can have conversations that are easier to have with me, there's going to be certain things, for example, that I won't be able to relate with, and like, with all due respect to you, like, there's certain things I just don't care about, and if I have to hear about them, I'm like, oh. Like, I won't physically do that. I'll bear down and like hear what you have to say. But inside, I'm like, oh, I don't care, like, it just, but still she needs to say it. And so if she has somebody that she can talk with about it, man, that's great for her. It's great for her friend. It's also good for me because I'm like, great. She has a friend that she can address these things in a meaningful and significant way. The other night, she had a friend call or message and said, hey, you know, I got to get on this call. My friend's calling and I don't know what they talked about. It doesn't really affect me. You know, and I don't want to be able to honor that because, yeah, we might have spent some time together otherwise, but I think it was good for her. And obviously she wants to be in service to her friend. And so having wholesome friends is important because it's going to come at a sacrifice. It's going to come at a sacrifice to me and our time. Or like I said, she was gone for several days in Texas with a friend. Well, that's a sacrifice to the kids, right? Because now she's not home and we homeschool. So there's that factor. So if those sacrifices are going to take place, it has to actually be a meaningful sacrifice. And it is, but we just want to ensure that it is.
Right.
And I'm glad you put it that way too, because it's about those friends that, you know, she said, I'm always there. And the reason she's there is because she knows that if it was her, they'd be there. That's the type of friends to bring around you. And it actually rolls into the next one, which was despise as drama and gossip. And she said it like, I don't have time for flaky friends. Like she even spoke into the next one because you did say like they just despise drama and gossip. And she says it. I ain't got time for that. You know, who among us has time for that, you know, and recognizing in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if some people do, or they're just making the time, but I think there's plenty of people who, you know, get so engaged with that. You know, I would say generally that men are more averse to gossip. I would say generally just because women by nature tend to be more relational than men do. So some of the gossiping that takes place is not mean-spirited. I don't think some of it is, but not all of it. I think it's just a way to build relationships and connection with other women, you know, but that sort of baggage gets brought into the relationship. And like she said, she doesn't have time for that. I certainly don't have time for that. I've got way more things that I can be doing with my time, whether it's running the business or engaged with her or playing with the children, than being negative about other people and getting wrapped up in things that really don't actually impact us at all.
Right.
For sure. That's the quickest way to get evicted off my island, is to bring that into my energy. You got to go.
Yeah. Her favorite thing to say is, it's not my circus, not my monkeys. That is like, and our children even say that, not my circus, daddy, not my monkeys, you know?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I like that.
And you said goals that are aligned with yours. So I think over the course of, like you said, 18 years of marriage, I know those goals for you, Ryan, have shifted as you grow. You know, I listened to a sermon actually yesterday, and he was talking about, you know, if God was to put on us the clothes that we were going to wear at our best moment when we're young, then they would be super, super big. So you have to really grow into each goal as you go through that. So
yeah,
when you talk about the alignment of goals, how have you seen that in Trish since over the last 18 years? How's that evolved?
Well, I mean, us being here in Maine is a great example of that. I don't think we moved to Maine from Southern Utah about 3 years ago, a little less than. And I don't think this was on either of our radars even 4 years ago.
No.
You know, so, you know, things change, things evolve. And I think this is part of leadership, both masculine and feminine leadership. You know, if I said, hey, we're doing this, and it was 5 years ago, there would have been a lot of gnashing of teeth and fights and everything else if that were the case.
Knockdown fights,
you know, but you know, and that was fine. If she said, no, I don't want to do that, I would have honored that. And I think we would have honored each other's desires and requests. And I think I believe that coming out here, she made more sacrifices than I did. I feel like I'm the biggest recipient of being out here. Sometimes I feel selfish. I know that you love it based on our conversations, but you know, she made greater sacrifices being out here than I did, for sure.
Right.
But the analogy I use is, imagine if we're all on like a Viking ship, and we're all, you know, there's 100 of us and we're all rowing to one direction. And then you have one person who's like, I actually don't want to go that way. And so they start rowing the other way. And then that one person turns into 2, turns into 5, turns into 15. And all of a sudden you have 50 guys rowing one direction and 50 guys rowing another direction. Like, nobody's going anywhere. But if you change that and say, okay, look, we're all going to go and we're going to row in the same direction, but maybe people have different techniques of rowing. And somebody says, hey, we're all rowing in the same direction. I found that if we row this specific way, it's more effective than the old way of doing it. And that person is still rowing in the same direction, but they're teaching you how to be more effective and more efficient. And then we all start rowing that way and we get to our objective more effectively or efficiently. That to me is what I'm talking about, is that we might have different ways of viewing the world or viewing the way that we see, fatherhood or motherhood or what we want to do. We're always going in the same direction, but we respect each other enough to say, hey, do you have an idea that would work better? And if she does, I try to default to that. I'll admit my ego gets in the way at times, but I do try to default to that. If I have a more effective way of doing it, I know because we're both stubborn that she might put up a fight, but if she sees it, she's going to honor and respect that. So we're always looking for new effective ways of fulfilling our mission, which I think ultimately, at least mine is to, again, lead our children in righteousness and then be connected. Because at some point, our kids are going to be gone. If our only mission revolves around being the kids, like what happens when the kids are gone? Like, do we hate each other? Do we divorce? Or have we created our own dynamic independent of the children?
Right. Trish, what is it? He spoke about the move to Maine. Is that when you would say was probably the biggest example of aligning with a goal that was maybe a little bit of a stretch?
That it was a big one. It was an exciting thing because that took a big leap for both of us. And that was putting a lot of trust in one another. I had to trust him that we weren't just moving out to, the sticks and maybe like the job was going to work. Maybe me and the kids would like it. Like I had to know that come whatever, Ryan was going to take care of it. And in the same, he had to know that I was all in supporting him. I'm all in on Order of Man. I'm all in on Ryan Michler. Like I support him. And so it really built like our trust in one another. I think it's formed a deeper bond between us and even with our kids too, because, we came out here literally knowing 6 people. And so, we knew the best 6 people, don't get me wrong, but we had each other. And so just being able to lean on each other, especially on the hard days and like, have we made a mistake? What are you thinking? How can we like get more adjusted? And so just being able to communicate with one another when it really was just us.
Gotcha.
I'm glad you brought up communication because I would love to know if there's something that you guys do on a daily basis or weekly or every month that helps keep you in alignment and help keeping you going in pursuit of the goals as a unit. So each of you know that you both have a role to play. Is there anything that you do regularly to have those touch points?
Yeah. More recently, we've involved the kids in this, but every morning, at least in the morning, Ryan and I have a conversation. Hey, what's going on today? Where are you going to be? Is there anything you need me to do? Morning, he and I have this conversation. We've just been bringing the kids into it. So they understand, these are the goals for the family for the day. Who needs to go where? I would like you to work on this project after school, like that kind of thing. But Ryan and I, we've always, well, not always, but it's something that we've developed on just keeping in touch with each other. Like yesterday, I knew he had a super busy day. And therefore, like, I couldn't have him pick up a kid from practice because I knew he was busy. And so it just works out, just touching base in the mornings so that we know who's where, what we're doing, how I can help, and just those little things. And then it keeps us all in alignment, what we're working towards.
And she's also got access to my calendar. So, she can see if it's, 3 p.m. and one of the kids needs to be ran to lifting, for example. It's like, well, Ryan can't do that today because he's doing a podcast. So she can see those things. So we're open that way. But yeah, that morning communication has been huge, especially as our kids get older. When they're younger, it's a bit easier because they're not really going anywhere, right? And if they are going somewhere, they're usually going together, not separate. But as our kids get older, one's got lifting and one has dance and then one has a play date and they're like scattered at this point. And so making sure that, and we've done this in the past, but admittedly we fell off the wagon a bit just with life and stress and, the things that come up, but we've been doing that over the past several days. And I think it's a huge difference just over the past several days of making sure that everybody's aligned. We know where we are. There's less questions. There's less confusion. There's less contention, and we all get each other and know where we're at.
Gotcha. So, honors herself. How do you see Trish honoring herself?
Okay. So I'll say it broadly, and then I'll get to it specifically. I think there's one of the issues that I get, or concerns I get from men, is, especially because they're listening to my podcast, they're interested in self-development. They wouldn't be listening to my podcast or connected with us in some way if they weren't interested in developing their own selves. But one of the concerns I get is that these men are interested in self-development, but their wife is not interested to the same degree. And that's a source of contention in the relationship, because they interpret it as their wife doesn't care about improving themselves. And maybe that's valid. Maybe it's not. We don't know. And so it's frustrating as a man wants to grow, that he interprets his wife as not wanting to do that at the same clip. And I actually felt that frustration, because I would get a new book or listen to a podcast and I'd really be into it. And then I would show her and she's like, I'm not reading that. Like that looks stupid. And so I thought that her self-development journey was supposed to be the same as my self-development journey. And then I was frustrated that not only she wasn't trying to improve herself, I interpreted it that way, that wasn't true, but that she didn't care about the things that I cared about. And so I took that personally. So it's this weird, really weird problem. But what I've realized is that she does care about herself, and she does have things that are important, and she does have areas in which she wants to improve. They're just not things that I necessarily want. So if I give her a self-development book, she's going to be repulsed by it. But if I give her a book, or she jumps on and does a masterclass about how to preserve food or keep bees better or grow a garden, man, she's all about it. And honestly, I couldn't care less about those things. The only reason I care about those things is there's two reasons. I'm the beneficiary of it. Right. And also I care about it because she's into it. And so what I've realized is that her self-development journey revolves around the things that are important to her: gardening, homesteading, meal prep, homeschooling, things that aren't necessarily exactly in alignment, but she is improving herself. And I've had to wake up and realize that that is self-development. It's just a different form of it than me sitting down and listening to some cool podcasts from Jordan Peterson, or reading a book from some, Stoic philosopher that she's like, I don't care about that stuff, but she's getting it in her own way. And that's important. If you're with somebody who isn't interested in self-development, that's a problem. We have to keep in mind, it's not our self-development, but some sort of self-development. Yeah, that's an issue for sure.
For sure. Trish?
I agree. I'm on same alignment with him. It is funny to think back, like all the books he'd hand me, or he was so excited because someone put out this YouTube thing. And I'm like, cool. Yeah. Like, wow. And it was really hard for me I didn't even hide that face. That's probably exactly how I said it. And it would cause contention. And so it was a beautiful day when he realized that my self-development was different than his. But it works because I understand that the other way too. So when Ryan, actually one of my favorite dates that we go on, we'll go into Barnes and Noble and we'll give each other a kiss and we'll say, see you later. And he goes to one side of the store and I go to the other one. And so I can find him in like technology or self-help or history, and he might have a book, but he comes and finds me and I've got like stacks of kids books, and I've got stacks of gardening books, and I've got cookbooks and all these things. And I'm sitting in the middle of the floor with him. And so he's had a great night. He's developed himself, and I am doing it as well. It's just different.
That's another thing. And that might be actually one of the green flags, is like the center of her universe. I could be wrong. So you'll correct me. The center of her universe is not me, and she's not the center of my universe. So when she's doing her thing, it's fine. Like, I don't need her to be engaged and active with me 100% of the time. Otherwise, I spin out of orbit. Like she can go do her thing, and I'm okay with that. And I can go do my thing. Even just last night, Wednesday nights are our own time. So Wednesday evening, I go to jujitsu and I train from about 6 to 8 or so, right in there. And I'll spend a little more time in the truck when I get home, checking messages or messing around on social media, because I know that's our own time. So she might be doing something around the house, or doing some canning, or maybe she's doing one of her master classes, or maybe she's on the phone with her family or her girlfriends. And like, cool, do it. This is our own time. You go do your thing. I don't need you to like be able to operate my life. You don't need me. we want to be together. We're more powerful together, but like neither of us need to have that in order to function individually on our own.
And you didn't word it that way in the 10, but her own hobbies and interests. I actually like the way you worded it this time. I'm not the center of her universe and she's not the center of mine. Like there are other things and other hobbies. Financially responsible.
Well, look, I mean, we know just even statistically that finances are a huge divide and issue with marriage, and marriage is hard enough as it is, especially if you're married to her. I'm just kidding. Especially if you're married to me. That's what I meant to say.
There we go.
Okay. So marriage is hard enough as it is, and you start to get financial issues into the thing, man, that is a real problem. And one of the things I've seen a lot of guys do is they'll get into a relationship because they love a woman, or, you know, maybe the sex is good, or like, these are not great reasons alone. Those things are important, don't get me wrong, but they're not like exclusively reasons to get involved in a marriage with somebody. And then they won't even ask about things like, how many kids do you want to have? Or even talk about spirituality or how we want to raise our kids through like what religion and what gospel, that kind of thing. And then they certainly don't ask about money. So it's like, well, what if you get into a relationship and you're a financially responsible individual and she's got $50,000 in student loans and $20,000 or $30,000 in consumer debt, and she doesn't know how to control her spending? Like, how do you think that's going to play out? How do you think that's going to work? So, you know, I handle most of the financial, like almost exclusively the financial decisions in our household. I communicate that with her. Not always great at that. Obviously, I get short and things. I think I've done better over the years. Better, a little better, you know, but I also know that she's financially responsible. Like I also know that she's not going to go blow all of our spending on some weekend spending spree because she's depressed or upset about something. So like, you got to find a woman who, and all of these things we're talking about apply to women with regards to men the same. Okay. So I know we're talking about in this context, but the same applies for women towards men. Yeah. Like this is important that they're not reckless with their money, because that's, well, and even in the context of spirituality, like we're stewards over our resources and our financial provision, even though we may have earned that through the blessings we've been given, the talents and the skills that we have and the opportunities, like we're to be stewards over those. If she can't be a steward or I can't be a steward, that's not somebody I'm interested in partnering with, because they're proving they're irresponsible.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, just being financially responsible. When we started dating, I was in high school, like I said, and I would get my paycheck and, you know, like I'd cash it out. I'd put my gas in my car. I'd go shopping with friends, go out to eat. Like it didn't really matter because I was in high school. I didn't really have responsibilities. And Ryan is actually the one that taught me how to balance a checkbook. I had no idea. And so our financial responsibility has definitely grown in our relationship, because first he taught me, I think you actually got me open my first bank account.
I think,
like I said, I was just cashing it.
I think you did that. But I also think I remember, I could be wrong, it's been a long time now, that I helped you do your taxes one year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you helped me when I was applying for like my Pell Grant and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a huge bonus with Ryan, because like he just gets numbers. I am not a number person and he very much is. So that was a perk for me. But then as our relationship grew, when we got married, we both still had our separate checking accounts, and we were trying to figure out like how that worked. And then he was activated and I had to take over all of the finances. He had to worry about just staying alive, and I needed to control, the bills getting paid. We really didn't have debt. So, it's just making sure like we were hitting the marks. And like, I was the one here when we purchased our first home. And so I had to do all of that. And then when he came home, that was interesting because I went from having full control to having to hand it back over to him. And so like it was really hard to get on the same page. Like, okay, well, who's balancing the checkbook? Should we combine bank accounts? And so it was like, it got really awful for a minute.
I mean, not just with finances, there were a lot of areas that there was a lot of contention as we got back together.
Right. And then when we had our first son, I stopped working. So I had no paycheck coming in. Therefore, I felt bad because I wasn't included in like the checking account anymore. I wasn't adding anything to it. So that was like yet another big hill we really had to get over. And just as time has moved on, we figured each other out better. Like it became, we had to sit down and this is our budget for this month. And, we had a couple lean years where it's like, can I please put $20 in the gas tank? So we had those conversations, and now it's like, hey, just so you know, it's the 15th and I just paid, these 5 bills. So that you'll see them coming through the account. And he might say, hey, Trish, those online purchases are really starting to add up. Like maybe it's time to cut back a little bit. And so that's kind of where we are now on things.
Gotcha. So, I can speak to that a little bit. Like you said it, Ryan, usually one of the biggest pain points in a marriage is financial, right? And
Right.
I have been the one that brought in the majority of the income to the home, but I'm also probably the one who will spend the quickest. Like she's very conservative with money. And I think there's new bills being printed every day. So what's the big deal? And, but needing her to speak up to me and go, you need to slow down, even having that hard conversation, because it's led to some difficult conversations between the two of us, because I would find out 3 months later that 90 days ago, we should have slowed down a little bit,
Yeah.
So being
Well, and that might be hard. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that might be hard too. I think for a woman who maybe isn't in the workforce, or maybe her income is, half of her husband's income because she's not working as many hours, something like, for her to even feel like she has the right to say that, like, I don't know, but maybe she feels like who are you to tell me about how to spend the money when I'm the one who brings it in? I don't know if you feel like that at all, but
no, but I just trust your judgment, because like I said, he handles most of it. And honestly, he is better at it. I trust you to say it. And like, if I started noticing like, hey, you've bought a lot of guns this last year, like, can we afford that? Are we still working towards our goals?
yeah.
And so I think, we're comfortable enough, we could have those conversations. And I think it's good that, both sides can have like the concern over financial goals.
Right.
Well, there's other things too. Like, so I know that our spending habits, I tend to spend less often, but when I make purchases, they're bigger purchases. Like this right here is my new bow. That cost me about $2,000, but I won't do that. Like it'll be another 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months before I make a purchase like that. Versus Trish, she might spend, $20 or $30 here or $50 there, but it'll be more frequent. So like we've understood our spending patterns. And one of the things that we've done is, I don't know if that we have an exact amount, but I would say if I just had to spitball and just kind of instinctively or intuitively say, I don't think either one of us would have a problem spending $100 or $200 like without really consulting the other person. I think once you get above that, like both of us respect each other enough to say, hey, like I'm going to buy this thing. It's, $500. Is the timing right? Is that okay? Again, not necessarily asking for permission, but just kind of coordinating how that can work.
Right. And sometimes that leads to discussion of like, do you need that?
Yeah.
Is this something we need now? Or, like, is it something we can get down the road? Or it might just plain be like, we already have that.
The answer is always yes, we need that right now. The answer is always. I wouldn't have brought it up if I didn't need it right now. Like, do you need a new bow? Yeah. Why would I have even said it if I didn't need it?
It's true. That was almost verbatim what I said.
Yeah.
We literally have 5 other bows in the house, but I need that one.
That one. Right. Obviously.
Cameron Hayes' name on that one by chance?
No, this one is a PSE. And so it's John Dudley's newest bow.
You actually touched on the,
whatever.
Yeah. You actually touched on this one in the last question about, when we were talking about honoring herself, but being spiritually aligned. Like how, like this, the whole purpose of this podcast, right? This faith, family, and fulfillment. How do we lean on our faith, to develop our family and become the most fulfilled in how we raise the kids and how we interact with one another? At what point did that become a big focus for you guys?
We've always been spiritually aligned. So we're LDS. So she was born and raised LDS. I didn't actually end up being introduced to the church until I was about 15 years old, and then ended up being baptized when I was 16, and we met when I was in my early 20s. She was 17. but we've always been spiritually aligned, and she's been the spiritual rock, relative to me. And so she's, guided me and got me on the path as I've slipped and fallen from time to time. But I don't know that a couple needs to be, exactly the same religion or denomination. I don't know that that's a necessity, but I do believe there's some fundamental truths, or maybe not truths is not the right way to say it, just some fundamental beliefs about our purpose on this life, or on this planet and in this life, and what we believe will happen to us when we die, and what our souls are meant to do. I mean, if you're so fundamentally disaligned, I just can't see that working out very well. And then especially as you add children into the mix, like, so what, I'm going to be Muslim and teach my children that, and she's going to be a Christian and try to teach them that. Like, I just don't see how that works. So I think there's some nuance that we can afford each other some leniency on, of course. And I think it could still work very well, but there's some fundamental beliefs about our purpose that I think have to be aligned for you to be able to build any sort of meaningful relationship, especially as you bring kids into the mix.
All right. Trish?
Right. And I think, that guides the principles and values which we live our life, and how we treat others, and the direction we raise our kids. And so I think, having the firm foundation, like, we are a Christ-centered home. Like, are we teaching these principles? Is this how we're living our lives? Can people look at us and know we're a Christian family? Because I can see their works. I can see how they treat others. And so for us, that's really important, because it might not be something that's spoken. Religion comes up with those close friends, but not with just anybody. And so I think, the way you live your life, the way you show up, that should represent your morals and your values and your principles. And if you're a Christian, that should show that.
I mean, people should know you're a Christian.
Right.
Like, they shouldn't have to ask. If they have to ask, then you're probably not living as a Christian. And I get that quite often. I'm not trying to toot my horn, but people will email me and say, "Hey, are you Christian?" "Yes, I am." "I knew it." "Of course you knew it. You should know it."
Right.
And if you don't know that, then I'm not doing what I need to be doing as a son of God.
Yeah.
We had a conversation with a couple, earlier in the series, and it was exactly that. That how they learned was from another Christian couple, and it wasn't by what they said. Had nothing to do with what they proclaimed with their mouth. It was the way they lived, how generous they were with their time and their talents and their treasure. Like, they just were super generous, and it bled over into just as an example,
Right. Right.
So I'm glad you said that. So, Ryan, and we're coming to the end of this, so we want to be respectful of your time. So I have one more question, and one thing you brought up. You actually said all of these apply both ways. And that was kind of where I was trying to get to, because those green flags, you've seen those develop, and you see them in Trish, and we spoke to it. If someone's listening to this podcast, it's a really good place to start thinking about what you're looking for in a spouse. If you honed in on those 10 things, and you could align yourself with those 10 things, like, the relationship that comes from that, the marriage that comes from that, would really be set up at the base level for a high level of success.
And it's not a guarantee, like, if you find somebody man or woman who hits all these flags, like, life is not guaranteed to be bliss.
Right.
And also, if you find somebody who checks off, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of these green flags, and a great example, the family thing that we talked about, I think in the first or second one, it's not a deal breaker. It's not an immediate deal breaker, but it is something to be aware of.
Right.
And you ought to pay closer attention to it. So and I'm talking about it in the context of man looking for a woman, because that's my job. Like, I work with men. Okay. So, but yes, I know it applies the other way, but if a man gets involved with a woman who doesn't come from a strong family background, and he wants to have a strong family, I don't think that's a deal breaker. I just think you ought to pay closer attention to it.
Right.
Because there's a few little things. Okay, well, what's going on in the family? Why did that happen? What do you feel about it? Maybe even there was abuse or some sort of trauma. If I'm going to commit to you, I need to be aware of those things so I can make a decision about how I want to live my life. And one of the things I get frustrated with too is that, I might say, well, here, let's just be really really controversial here. Let's say that you get involved with a woman who was sexually abused as a child or younger. Or here's another one, a woman who was in a past relationship and has children with somebody else. Men aren't obligated to get into a relationship with that woman just because they love her or out of some sense of duty or obligation. And every time I bring that up, people get frustrated. Oh, well, that's not being a real man. You know what? No, there's some things that are deal breakers, and getting involved with a woman who has other children is going to bring other dynamics into the relationship. You need to be aware of that. Or a woman who is sexually abused, who doesn't like to be physically touched, you're going to partner with that woman for the rest of your life. You're not obligated to do that. You have to make that decision. Is that a deal breaker? And the only person that gets to decide that is you. It's not society. It's not culture. All I'm advocating for is figure it out.
Right.
And if you want to get into a relationship with a woman who has other children because you love those children and you love her and you wanted to be whatever reason, all the power to you. I want it to succeed. Actually, I want those children to have an engaged father, but I want men to be able to make that choice with all of the information at hand.
Amen. I actually had almost that exact same conversation with my oldest daughter yesterday. She's got a young fellow that's popped up in her life that, we've been married 25 years. This is 26. My parents have been married for 50 this past year. My sister was married for 20. So 95 years of marriage combined, so she's all around her. She's seeing this foundation of marriage. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, but we've figured out how to work through the hard spots. And this kid that's talking to her has not had that example. And so she wanted to run that by me. And she ran it by me to say, hey, Dad, are you going to you want me to kick him to the curb? Which is an amazing conversation to have with a daughter. Yeah. And I told her, no, it's not about
level of trust.
Yeah, it's not about that. It's the fact that you recognize that it should be something you discuss with him. Like, you've got to figure that out. Like, if he had that example of having a torn apart marriage that was just rocky and very contentious, if he wants to create something different, you can give him the example of, hey, I came from something that was different than that. And you can help him build that. But you got to know what's where are his intentions? What does he see as the ultimate success in that?
Right. Area? And that reminds me a lot of us, because as I said, I came from a very large traditional family, and Ryan's background is just different. His mom had been married a couple of times. His dad was in and out of his life. And so for me, I needed to know where he stood on that. And from the beginning, we have both been on board. We want a strong marriage. We want to raise children, not a child, or maybe down the road we can think about it. That was the goal from the beginning. We had that conversation right up front.
And here's another way of looking at this is, so we're talking about these green flags specifically as it relates to coming from a strong family dynamic. Well, I didn't necessarily come from that, but the reason that I want to be a dedicated and committed husband and father is because I didn't come from that. And I know what it's like to wake up and wonder if your dad loves you, or if you did something wrong. And I don't ever want my children to experience that. So that situation, I was going to say negative, but it's not even negative. It's just the reality of the situation drove me into who I am today and who I'm trying to become. But those are the conversations we had, because it doesn't always equate to that. It could mean that, hey, I'm going to be a loser just like my dad might've been, right? But you have to have the conversation. You have to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the old analogy when you ask someone why they're an alcoholic and they say, well, my dad was an alcoholic. And you meet someone who doesn't drink at all. Why don't you drink? Well, my dad was an alcoholic. It's that decision of what am I going to deal with?
Yeah, where are the breaks, and what am I willing to challenge myself on, to overcome, to get to the life, into the relationship, into the communication, and all those different things that you want. It's all about making sometimes the harder choice to talk about where you've been, hurt, and where the trauma was and how you can overcome that. But I completely agree that it needs to be on the table, because the other person in the equation needs to know, they need to know where the dynamite might explode. And you kind of need to know ahead of time strategically when this happens, because it'll come up, this is how it's going to be dealt with, and know ahead of time so that you're not caught off guard and you're so reactive that you're not meeting the needs of your partner.
Good point.
Yeah.
Really good point.
So I always try to close out with the same question with everybody. As a couple, what do you consider to be your superpower? Like I've called this like this word coupleness. It's not a word, but I'm going to call Webster and see if I can get it added. But as a couple,
We'll add any other word
Absolutely.
these days or change the definition of everything. So I'm sure you'll have no problem with that.
I think I just could send in a letter and they'll just add it. But as a couple, like what do you see your superpower to be?
I have a thought. So
Let's hear it.
my thought, I don't know, it doesn't sound very, sexy or superpower-ish, but I would just say committed.
Oh,
Like we're both committed to each other. Like, I don't care what happens. I don't care what goes wrong. I'm right sometimes. I'm wrong sometimes. She's right sometimes. She's wrong sometimes, but I'm committed. Like I'm all in, I'll protect and defend her. There's nothing that could happen that would waver my loyalty and commitment. And that to me makes us pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, I agree. Because the thing I thought is like, we're all in, just like you said, you want to move across the country and buy an old farmhouse and have events? Yeah, I do. So,
Which sounds crazy.
it sounds crazy. What were we thinking? But he knows I support him. And he also knows if it's a really bad idea, I'll talk him off the edge. So I am all in for Ryan. He's all in for me. And it comes back to the commitment.
and it shows, just so you know, it shows.
Thank you.
Ryan, how do people find you? How would you recommend people learn more about the Iron Council and the Order of Man and all that, and your book, which is amazing, Sovereignty of Man?
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
And I think you got a second one coming this year, right?
I do later this year. Yeah. Well, if you want to listen to what I have to say, you can check out the podcast, orderofman.com. If you want to fight with me on social media, you can do that too. I'm always down for that. At Ryan Michler on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. You're actually gonna have to type out the whole thing these days, because otherwise just Instagram these social media companies won't just pop it up in your feed. Like you have to actually type in to the letter the entire thing, which is frustrating, but it is what it is. So if you want to fight and debate and argue and whatnot on social media, we can do that. If you want to just listen casually and just make sure, what's this guy all about, then the Order Man podcast is the best way to do that.
Gotcha. All right. We appreciate your time. Ryan, I usually ask one of our guests to pray us out. Would you mind doing that today?
Sure. Yeah. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this time that we had together. We're grateful for the opportunity that we have to find a partner who we can walk through this life with and face challenging and hard times together. We're grateful for the technology that we have to be able to have these conversations. And we ask that those who would listen to this conversation would have an open heart and mind, that it might serve them in some way so they can lead their families and lives more effectively. We're grateful for you. And we say these things in the name of my Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Faith, Family, Fulfillment, brought to you by Chris and Suzanne Vester. We hope you enjoyed listening to this week's guests and stories. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Chris and Suzanne on Instagram at HVAUTOCOO and Suzanne.c.vester. That's at SUZANNE.c.vester.